Well, like I said when I was reading Scripture, we've been looking at various heresies that have been in the church throughout the years, and the church has always had heresies that it has struggled with and dealt with, and there's always something going on in Jesus' church. There's always something happening. Today's a little bit different. We're not going to look at history. We're not going to talk about the past. We're going to talk about the present. We're not going to look into history books. We're going to look into our hearts, and we're going to look into the headlines. And I'm going to warn you all. I can tell that I've stepped on some toes of the first couple services here, and I may step on yours here today. I hope you hear it. When I was a graduate student in the School of Religion at Vanderbilt, I attended the weekly worship meetings in the chapel every single week. And one week, the dean of the School of Religion was preaching. And the sermon, it was not a short one. It wasn't a short one at all. So that's where I learned how to preach, was at Vanderbilt, where the sermons were not short. And I remember him ticking off a lot of ways that God's word seemed to run counter to his politics, to his theology, to his conceptions of justice and equality, of even right and wrong. And I sat there wondering, man, where is he going with this thing? I know he's setting us up for something. Instead, he ended with these very memorable words. He said, so we can all agree the Bible is a problem for us. And he sat down, and I scarcely believed what I had heard, and I was waiting for a punchline, hoping he was going to stand up again and kind of unpack what he just had to say, but he didn't. And so then I thought, well, maybe this is a practical joke. Maybe I'm on like a theological version of like Candid Camera, and Alan Funt's going to step out at some point. But that wasn't the case either. What I did see were hundreds of heads nodding in approval, some vigorously. And I wondered, am I wrong? Did I miss something? I don't think so. I was watching a heresy in action, a heresy that I think we are battling in the church today. And like I said in the introduction, I call it Hyper-Humanism. Hyper-Humanism. Now what is a heresy? A heresy is a belief or a doctrine that distorts, destabilizes, or destroys the mystery of faith. Now, hyperhumanism, in case you're wondering, it's not a 4-year-old on a sugar high. That's not what it is. Bo wrote that joke. He wanted me to give it. And no one has laughed at either service so far. I thought I would try it out. He said it was my delivery, but my delivery was good that time, wasn't it? It's just not very funny. It's just not very funny. Hyperhumanism is our belief that our humanity defines God. That our humanity defines God. And we're going to unpack that in just a second. Hyperhumanism has evolved from a belief called humanism. Humanism is the 15th century school of thought in which most of the reformers were trained. Humanism gave birth to the Reformation. Humanism is a beautiful, wonderful thing. John Calvin, Erasmus, John Knox, even to a lesser extent, Martin Luther were all trained in a school of thought called humanism. Now, we need to say they were not trained in secular humanism, which a lot of us know about, but they were schooled in Christian humanism. And Christian humanism is the belief that our humanity is informative for understanding God. Our humanity can inform our understanding about who God is. And this is because God is deeply interested in our humanity, and our humanity has a dignity and a worth. The fact that we're created in the image of God, the fact that we share a common human flesh with Jesus Christ is an awesome, awesome thing. Because we share something with God, we are somebody. Psalm 8:4 teaches this beautifully. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? A classic humanist statement is found right at the beginning of John Calvin's classic work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. John Calvin said, it is certain that man never achieves a clear knowledge of himself unless he has first looked upon God's face and then descends from contemplating him to scrutinize himself. So if we want to know ourselves, we need to really know God. Hyperhumanism regards our humanity as something even greater. Hyperhumanism is the belief that our humanity is determinative for understanding God, that our humanity defines God. Now, all heresies are relative. Heresies overemphasize one thing and underemphasize something else. Hyperhumanism overemphasizes our human ability, our human potentiality, as it de-emphasizes our sin. Hyperhumanism also de-emphasizes the holiness of God and the otherness of God. In other words, The hyperhumanist thinks of himself better than he should and thinks of God less than he should. He thinks we're not in as much need of God's grace as we truly are. And because of that, we're in a position to question God's word, to deny God's power and his authority and even his rights over us. If our sense of fairness, our experience, our logic, our pain, our wishes, our desires, our hopes, our questions, our doubts, our fears, our hurts stand in contradiction to God's revealed word, the hyperhumanist judges against God's word, not against who we are. And so for the hyperhumanist, Scripture becomes a helpful and handy advisor out of which we are to sift the facts and determine what is true for us, rather than what Scripture says it is, which is the God-breathed word, profitable for teaching and reproof, correction, and all training in righteousness. So, what does hyperhumanism in practice look like? What does it look like? Early this spring, Calvin earned some money picking dandelions out of our front yard, and I paid him a king's ransom of a 10-cent bounty per dandelion because I thought that was the going rate. It's actually a penny per dandelion, but I paid him 10 cents per dandelion. So this got into the massive amounts of money for a 5-year-old, massive amounts of money. Well, after he received the money, I told him, Calvin, in our house, we tithe the money that comes back in the door. We give 10% back to God. And he immediately questioned that practice. He said, no, Dad, I need to save my money for college. He's 5 years old. And by the way, he didn't save the money for college. The next day he went shopping and bought pool toys with his money. Well, in the face of this intransigence, I brought out the big guns and I said, Calvin, God's word teaches that if we bring our tithes to the Lord, he will open the storehouse of blessings, the windows of heaven, and pour out a blessing until there is no need. And I thought this was just a beautiful moment of teaching. And he looked at me very unimpressed and he said, that doesn't even make any sense. To which I replied, it does not have to. You see, young Master Calvin's position on tithing is hyperhumanist. The hyperhumanist needs to understand to believe. Jesus commanded us that we believe to understand. Here's a few more to chew on. Jesus taught that we're sinners who stand in need of grace, that the grace of God has been revealed for all people, the Jew first and then to the Gentile. The hyperhumanist believes that, well, we really haven't done anything that bad, so we really don't need as much grace as the Bible says we do. On the other extreme, the hyperhumanists may come to believe, once they hit a hopeless state, that their sin is so singularly bad, so uniquely terrible, that God cannot possibly forgive it, so they don't seek his grace there either. The Bible clearly teaches that Jesus is the only way to truly know and be reconciled to God. It makes no sense unless that is what we take from it. The hyperhumanist believes that's unfair, so they believe all paths more or less lead to God. The miracles of Jesus to the hyperhumanist appear impossible, so they assume that a well-meaning writer concocted them to make Jesus' story better. For the hyperhumanist, ethics must be grounded in experience. Morality must conform to reality. Practicality is the ultimate proof. God does nothing that transcends us or that we cannot understand or even find sensible, reasonable, or plausible. I read a sermon preached by a pastor on Pentecost last Sunday. He was looking at Acts 2 and the arrival of the Holy Spirit in the church. One of the major passages of God's Word where it teaches that the Holy Spirit descended on people's heads just like tongues of fire. His sermon read like this. He said, this passage is an exaggeration, a legendary, poetic, parabolic expression of the truth of our common humanity. That is something to appreciate. Perhaps Pentecost happens in small ways each day as we open our lives to the sacred spirit of life in and around us. The hyperhumanist God is a small God who does small things. He is a small God who does small things, who ends up looking, well, a lot like us. Albert Schweitzer is a name a lot of you probably know. He was a 19th century theologian. He was a humanitarian. And he dealt with some hyper-humanists in his age who were trying to discover the so-called historical Jesus. What they wanted to do, they wanted to strip away all of the myth and legend and half-truths from the Bible and discover really who the true Jesus of Nazareth really, truly was. Schweitzer noticed that the Jesus they found ended up resembling the individuals doing the looking. Schweitzer said that as if they're peering down a deep well into the past and seeing their own reflection in the water down at the bottom, assumed they had found God's true face. You know, the Bible teaches that we're not to look for ourselves. The Bible teaches that we're not to find ourselves. The Bible teaches we're to find God's grace. Romans 1. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of salvation to everyone who believes. But what do? We take this and we turn it and we make it look like us. Romans 1 again warns us, for although they knew God, they didn't honor God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man. You know, the hyper-humanist doesn't deny God. They just simply fool themselves into believing that God is not that great and God is not that glorious. And rather than allowing God to show us his gospel through what he has made plain to us, what he has shown to the world, the hyper-humanist points it all back toward humankind. The poet Walt Whitman put it, I celebrate myself. I sing myself. And I assume what you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me is good as belongs to you. So, if we take God's word as God's word, does that mean we're a fundamentalist? Now, a fundamentalist by definition is someone who majors in the minors, who, as Jesus said, swallows a camel but strains a gnat. The fundamentalist concerns themselves with outward displays rather than inner devotion. The fundamentalist is more concerned with what other people are doing rather than what Jesus is doing. Jesus taught a generous orthodoxy, in essentials unity, in non-essentials charity, and all things truth and love. If we take God's word as God's word, does that mean that we check our brain at the door and we accept uncritically everything we're taught? No. One of the reasons I became a Presbyterian is because we love to use the brain God gave us. Real faith, true faith, is a thinking person's exercise. It takes a wisdom to ask questions of God. And you know what? God doesn't mind questions. He really doesn't. The Bible is filled with questions. All our Heavenly Father wants us to do with our questions is ask Him rather than asking ourselves. Some of the greatest minds that the world has ever known have been Bible-believing, Jesus-loving Christians. Augustine and Athanasius and Thomas Aquinas, Martin Luther, Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Rembrandt. Jonathan Edwards was considered the most intelligent man of his day. Dostoevsky, C.S. Lewis, Reinhold Niebuhr, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Karl Barth. These were all brilliant, brilliant people who believe this is the Word of God. You see, God gave us a brain with which to worship Him, and that's because minds are not disposable, but they're transformable. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. We've been looking at the history of heresy, and that history teaches us two things. Number one, we cannot deny the power of the gospel. We cannot deny the power of the gospel. It is salvation for everyone who believes. Jesus wins. Jesus wins. Heresies do not. It says in the Psalms, weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. The second thing it teaches us is that nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. We're saved by grace. We're saved by gospel, not by what we do. And that's good because Jesus, our head, our captain, is perfect. So we don't have to be. And in his perfection, Jesus will preserve his church against every failing, every fault, every foe. Now today, however, we're not talking about history. We're talking about making history. The history of hyperhumanism has yet to be written, but God's word and history shows what it's going to be. But the day is coming when they're going to ask, what did the church do? What did the church do? And history may even ask, what did the Presbyterian Church of Stanley do? Did we acquiesce? Did we compromise? Did we fear? Did we hide? Did we hate? Did we castigate? Did we become futile in our thinking? Did we worship the creature rather than the Creator? Or did we do something else? Did we make an account for the hope that is in us? Did we wait for the mercy that leads to everlasting life? Did we love God with all our heart, mind, and strength? Did we love our neighbor as ourselves? Did we allow God to touch our lips and testify to his truth? You know, as the denomination changes around us, this is not a struggle we have chosen. It really isn't. This isn't a fight that we've gone out and picked. And there would not be many of us who would not gladly throw it down, as some have. But it may very well be the struggle for which we have been chosen. Isaiah 62:6 proclaims, "On your walls, O Jerusalem, I have sent watchmen all the day and all the night. They shall never be silent." You know, God just doesn't choose anyone to be his watchman. It's an honor. 1 Chronicles 29 says, "But who am I, and what is my people, that we should be able to offer willingly, for all things come from you." This time, this place, this is our privilege. This is our privilege. Now, I did not used to be so confident about these things. Even that, I believe you could call a hyperhumanist mindset, that I did not believe that if I did right and remained in God's will, I used to wonder terribly and terrifically how it would all turn out. You know, I always sat in that Vanderbilt University chapel in the same pew, in the same spot, in the same place, middle of the 12th row, on the right-hand side. And you may say, well, that was the Presbyterian in me taking hold. Well, it wasn't, because God met me there one afternoon. Before I moved to Nashville to begin my studies, I looked for a place, or I looked at the place I had to live. I was looking for a job. I was going to drop off some stuff in a self-storage unit, and nothing worked out. The place I was supposed to live was not as advertised. All the resumes I sent out, nobody cared. I literally knew not a single person in Nashville, and I did not want to start life over again in a new city. And so I was really looking for something, and I just stumbled into the chapel one Thursday afternoon, and I poured my heart out before God for the better part of an hour. And I told him I knew he had called me there, but I was wondering why. And I told him that I was terrified. And in so many words, I told God that I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust him anymore. And I wished I'd listened to my own judgment rather than his. And I sat up in the pew, and I was exhausted. And I just opened a hymn book, and the pages fell to a hymn that I've never seen. It's a hymn called "Give to the Wind Thy Fears." And it goes like this: "Give to the wind thy fears, hope and be undismayed. God hears thy sighs and counts thy tears. God shall lift up thy head. Leave to God's sovereign sway to choose and to command. So shalt thou wondering own that way. How wise, how strong his hand." Those words echoed in my soul like thunderclaps. And it was like they were written just for me, to meet me at that desperate time. And suddenly that fear was gone, and it was replaced with a hope for the future and a confidence in my Heavenly Father and his hand on my life. And so I tore the page out of the hymnal and I stuffed it in my pocket. Don't do that here, please. Don't That's why we use screens. That's why we use screens. I know some of us fear these days. I know we fear the conversation about what do we believe. Some of us fear doing nothing. Some of us fear doing something. I know we fear what the denomination may become. I know we fear what the Presbyterian may do. I know some of us fear what may happen to the Presbyterian Church of Stanley. I know some of us fear we may not be accepted. I, for one, don't. I don't. For one reason. It's hyper-humanist. Fear is a statement that God cannot solve our problems, that we can break something beyond God's ability to repair and restore. About those problems, by the way, the Bible's not the problem. God's word is not the problem. God is not the problem. We're the ones with the problem, and that problem is sin. But on the cross, God made our problem his problem. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of salvation to everyone who believes. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith. The righteous shall live by faith. That is his promise. Would you pray with me, please?